Hello and a warm welcome to the show. Coming up this week, the secrets to success. While the government continues its push for more jobs in rural parts of the country, some career experts are now warning a tree change can sometimes hinder your career opportunities. Well, this raises the question, is it possible to have a strong career if indeed you do move to the country, and which industries specifically should actually avoid it?
I actually, listening to the introduction, I'm not sure if it's an industry issue. I think it's more of a demographic and age issue. I think as a remote worker, industry's probably, remotely you can work any industry. I think it's, especially with the government talking, I actually think it's, you've got to talk to the right people about a tree change and a career shift. Because if you're young, it's probably not going to work for you.
Because this week we've had debates about energy security, about even maybe special zones, by which I'm referring here to South Australia, that could even carve out a niche and a special offering, which could act as a magnet, you could argue. So to your point, you know, areas that haven't necessarily been a magnet for the young demographic find other attractive reasons to actually morph into that. I mean, are we seeing that might be a possibility, Jane?
Definitely.
How are you
to be quite honest, people can go anywhere to work these days, because as long as you leverage technology and you've already built a strong reputation in your field, I think if you start working remotely from a very young age, you know, straight from high school or straight from university, you haven't built your reputation yet. But once you've got a solid reputation, if you decide to make the tree change or sea change, as you've done, then you can leverage that reputation, make sure you still stay front of mind and very relevant in your chosen career.
Nigel, you're pretty scathing, even to Jane's point about the Skype and the connectivity. We've heard horror stories.
Yeah.
And I know they always make the headlines, but what's been your direct experience?
Look, I think if you're going to attract population, if you're going to relieve the housing crisis in the city by trying to get workers to Armidale, Tamworth, wherever it is, you've got to make sure you've got the infrastructure. And to be really blunt about it, in regional areas, the infrastructure for, I'm not sure about your experience, but mine is not good. We've been bequeathed NBN satellite Sky Muster, which works, but it costs more, and you're limited in download to about 50 gig a month. Now, what business working remotely can adequately, like I run about 300 gig. So, you know, I think, and it'll get resolved, but I think it's a huge issue, because as a remote worker, the first thing that comes to mind is, can I be connected? And am I going to have issues with that connectivity? And if I am, it's safer to stay in the city.
To that end, also, you have the advantage, Jane, of just simply the FaceTime. I mean, we like to think that that's just a mouse click away, one's image comes up. But if it's grainy, if it's buffering, clients have a short shrift with that, don't they? I mean, how many people are really going to stick with you? I mean, do you find that even there's particularly with city types, there's just, get it right the first time or don't waste my time?
Oh, without a doubt. But even in the city, your internet connection can be a little bit dodgy at times. So I found that. And I find when I'm working with clients who are, say, in Singapore or the US, their connection's better than mine at times. So if you're a remote worker, you really need to make sure that you do have very strong internet connection. Roll on the NBN. We really need that everywhere. And recently, a statistic with ABS, when it was to do with people's employment in remote areas, there are 79% of the remote workers have got internet connection, good internet connection, but the rest don't. Whereas in the cities, it's 88% have got good internet connection. So obviously it's a lot easier, but we need to improve the infrastructure and connectivity.
Go beyond internet though, because there are whole other kind of practicalities as well. What are you finding that, you said you built the business out, so you've now got a regional cohort that hadn't arguably existed before. Are you tailoring the product in any different way to those clients versus the urban ones?
Absolutely, and I think that's just the normal evolution of a business in any case. But regional clients or regional people definitely have different needs. They've got different markets, so you do have to address those needs and markets differently than you would city city clients. What's interesting though, and a big upside, I think, in regional, especially in Victoria,
Right.
there's the VRCLP, which is the Victorian Regional Community Leadership Program. So being a small business or a regional business, you can actually go and get really, really good training specifically designed for your regional area to help you out. So there is a lot of support in regional areas, which we tend not to hear about.
Is that a nationwide? That's state specific, but I mean, can we say that that's available beyond Victoria? What's
Well, I focus more on New
consistency?
South Wales with regard to the remote working.
And a similar kind of arrangement there for.
Yeah, there are a lot of programs that are assisting remote workers now, and more businesses themselves. For example, a recent Flex Jobs survey has found that companies such as SAP, Allergan, Shutterstock, they really encourage remote workers, and globally, companies like Apple, IBM, Xerox, American Express, they also are very inclusive of remote workers, so they can help them very much to make that work for them.
Where doesn't it work, Jane? What are the areas where you might have the view that it's directly transferable to be absent, but actually, in fact, it can all just splutter and prove thoroughly unsuccessful? What industries have you been most challenged by?
There are
people
no
most
specific
challenged?
industries where it doesn't work.
Right.
Where it doesn't work is the attitude of the individual and the team and perhaps even the manager itself. So if they're able to negotiate working remotely, the important thing is not to be out of sight, out of mind. I think that's one of the dangerous things. And that's probably why you also fly all over Australia and globally too, I'm sure, because this is what you need to do.
Yeah, and you do need to do that. So airports are very important. Infrastructure of roads is very important. There's a lot of upsides. One of the great things about regional areas, and I think if someone is considering a tree change or to work remotely, is that regional people are insanely innovative.
In what sort of ways?
Well, scarcity breeds inventiveness. Right. So when, for example, and let's take it to an extreme, if you're out in the middle of the Northern Territory, outback somewhere like Daly Waters or Katherine or even Alice Springs, where you don't have endless resources, money is a bit tight, what happens is having less actually forces you into a position where you have to think differently to overcome that particular barrier. If you've got everything on a plate, you tend not to think as creatively. So one of the advantages working remotely in regional areas is you do have to think differently about your business model, and as a result of that, that can actually become an enormous opportunity in how you work and how you communicate. So when you do come to a city, your communication skills are much more focused because you've only got that little window of opportunity to talk with a client. So in a sort of flipped about way, there's massive opportunity in the fact that regional often doesn't have the infrastructure that we're saying that it should.
Would you have started this earlier, or you're quite happy with looking back on things, the time you took to your point earlier, actually form the foundations, and not trying to do all of this when you were that wet behind the ears?
I would have done it earlier had the opportunity arisen.
Okay.
Probably not in my 20s. I think, the first home buyer argument falls a little bit flat because younger people want city life. But, in my 40s I would have jumped earlier if the opportunity was there and if my business required it. But, I think I moved at the right time because it was the time I moved.
Yeah. Listen, inspiring and nice to get a different take on the 9 to 5 and those office confines with Jane Jackson there, the career management coach, and Nigel Collin there, small business specialist.